The gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Ogles, is now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the Director for being here and answering the questions so thoroughly. I do want to perhaps emphasize, what may be the key takeaway as you hear everyone, and I want to compliment or echo Mr. Foster here in a moment, but when you look at, Mr. Sessions asked about the data retention period. Mr. Williams asked about the notion of will you delete data that otherwise would no longer be collected. And then I would also take that a step further, that if you've collected data and there's been an investigation and someone's been cleared, then will that data be deleted because it's no longer necessary? And we've seen federal agencies like Treasury have some security breaches, security issues. And so the idea that this data is somehow impenetrable or safe, I think, is a bit of a misnomer when we've seen systems all across, our government, quite frankly, have failures in that security. We know that China and other, adverse, hostile entities and nations are trying to get access to this data. So I think it's important that we address this data issue, this data retention issue, and have very clear parameters, and quite frankly, aggressive parameters in deleting that data versus housing it in perpetuity because of the risk associated therein. And again, even in your own comments, you talked about data security and the issues with trafficking and fentanyl and such. That's not your average small business owner who's having to report and suddenly has a vulnerability out there. But with that, thank you for addressing those, and we look forward to getting that information back from you. I know we've seen roughly 100,000 Americans die every year from drug overdoses, most from fentanyl, and Treasury itself has linked Mexican banks and cross-border cash flows to the cartels financing that flow and that poison. How many American overdose deaths can be traced back to the laundering networks running through Mexican banks like Cibanco, Intercam, or Vector? And why is FinCEN still granting them extensions instead of cutting them off from the U.S. financial system immediately?
Thank you, Representative Ogles, for those comments and for that excellent question. I don't have an answer on the number of deaths that can be traced back to these financial institutions. It's certainly something that we can try to estimate. But I will say that any death would be too much, right? Sure. And so, but what we found in publicly calling out these three financial institutions as a primary money laundering concern is we made a very public case as to how they have supported cartel financing. The extensions we have granted in terms of the effective date have, as we've noted in public, because we've been working so closely with the Mexican government, which has taken over those financial institutions, including replacing the heads of their compliance departments at these financial institutions. It's important when we took action against these financial institutions that we also made sure that any innocent people, to include innocent Americans, innocent Mexican citizens, were able to extricate their funds from these institutions. And that's what the time period of a delayed implementation was able to accomplish. But meanwhile, we have been working very closely with the Mexican government to ensure that these financial institutions are being effectively regulated at the local level in Mexico, and that any further money laundering concerns have been removed.
Well, and I appreciate that, but I also want to give caution, and we've seen that most, if not all, of the institutions in Mexico are infected with cartel operatives. So this idea that they are going to self-regulate is, I think, somewhat laughable. And so at the end of the day, this is about outcomes. Are you ceasing the flow of illegal funds into the United States and back to Mexico, which is flooding our streets and killing our kids? And if you're not, then you need to shut it down. Whether you like the president or not, I happen to be an ally, an advocate for the president. Crime has come to a halt in this city because the president had a will to do so. The former administration said we couldn't secure the border. In a matter of days, the border was secure. We have to have the will to show Mexico, the cartels, and any of their associates that if you mess with the United States of America, we will shut you down, period. And again, they're not necessarily our ally when they're allowing the killing of our children and flooding our streets with illicit drugs. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Ogles. The